You. We'll go ahead and open the February 25th, 2025 meeting of the Des Moines Waterworks Board of Trustees. We first up have our consent agenda, which includes the minutes from January 28th, 2025 Board of Waterworks Trustees meeting, the minutes from the February 4th, 2025 Finance and Audit Committee meeting, and the minutes from the February 11th, 2025 Planning and Committee meeting. Our financial statements, list of payments for January 2025, the summary of CEO approved expenditures in excess of 50,000, and our next meeting date of March 25th, 2025. Is there anything within that consent agenda you would think we should pull out?
Nope, today.
Okay. Then do I have a motion to?
So moved. Second.
Okay, all in favor of approving the consent agenda?
Aye.
And on to our public comment period. I want to take this time during the public comment period to officially welcome David to the table.
Thank you.
And joining us as our newest Des Moines Waterworks board member.
Excited to be here. Thank you.
Great. With that, do we have any other members of the public today wishing to speak or any online? Okay. Then we'll jump right into our action items. Our first action item up, item 3A, is the amendment to the Dickinson Bradshaw Legal Services Agreement.
Andrea, in 2021, board designated John Landy as legal counsel to the board and executed an engagement agreement with the Dickinson law firm. Under that agreement, Dickinson agreed to represent Des Moines Waterworks for a 5-year term, and also agreed that the hourly rates would stay the same for the first 3 years of that 5-year term. And I believe that those rates were the same for some period of time before that as well. I will note that Dickinson, Mackaman, Tyler, and Hagan has joined with the Bradshaw firm to become Dickinson, Bradshaw, Fowler, and Hagan now. But we still have the same legal counsel, same access that we've always had to John. The agreement that we signed back in 2021 did allow for call for an annual legal services review with legal counsel and the chair and vice chair. We did have that annual meeting on February 12th. Reviewed perspectives that the board had on the legal services we received this year, which were all very positive. Given that the timeline for the initially agreed upon hourly rate has elapsed, Dickinson has proposed an amendment, which is attached to this board memo. An amendment adjusting the fees upward slightly, and you can see there for the various levels of staff what the proposed hourly rates would be. The review committee that met with John for the annual review has taken a look at that amendment and recommends that the board authorize execution of that amendment. So we're here today requesting that the board authorize execution of the attached amendment.
So I need a motion authorizing the CEO and general manager to execute the amendment dated January 16th, 2025 to the legal services engagement agreement.
So moved. Second.
I'll start with some comments as one of the board members that met with John at that annual review. I just want to shine a spotlight on the fact that we do take the time to meet with our legal counsel annually to share our thoughts, our concerns, ask questions on the services that we receive, and so it is an ongoing opportunity to build off of each other And the other important thing noting with our legal services is the for lack of better words, the warehouse of opportunities that we have working with the firm in all of the specialties and various counsels that you provide. So as one of those individuals that reviewed this, I understood and appreciated the rate increase. But are there any other questions or comments on this item?
Ted, on the fiscal impact, it says the legal services are budgeted in the various departments. Is that budgeted at the revised level or the old?
You know, it's the budget is varies enough year to year that the change isn't gonna make enough difference to put us over. So we believe that we budgeted adequately for the revised fees. And I think it's easily covered within the budget.
As you can, those legal fees can vary depending on what happens during the year, so. Like any budget item, I think the legal budget is highly guesswork at the beginning of the year. I mean, you kind of look at past years, but who knows what happens? And although I think we had a separate budget for regionalization, is that
We
right?
did, that's right.
I mean, even that I think impacted a little bit on what we did, and so, hopefully even looking back, those are gonna be higher than they've been, so. I'll just say, John, I appreciate your work, individual, and your colleagues' work. It's a good partnership that we've had with your fund program. Thank you, we appreciate it.
Yeah, I would just add, that's also part of the legal review with Andrea that, most of the feedback, I think we've talked in a relationship, both from the board and from staff, it's been positive work here, so. We realize that every cost of everything's going up a little bit, so that's part of it, but we're happy to continue the relationship.
So we have a motion and a second on the table. There are no other questions or comments. I'll ask all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, moving on to item 3B, which is to receive and file the 2025 strategic plan KPIs.
Andrea, as we discussed at the Finance and Audit Committee meeting where these KPIs were presented in some detail, this is the 5th year of our 5-year cycle of strategic planning. So the last year of this particular plan, this year's staff did spend some time looking at the original plan and seeing what initiatives had been identified that we hadn't had a chance to address yet, what initiatives were ongoing, and we wanted to continue. I'm not going to go through the whole thing because we did that at F&A, but I will just comment a couple of things. We're going to continue our focus on succession planning. There are some KPIs related to succession planning and ensuring we have the knowledge base to continue operating at the level that we do. Lead service line replacement is another program we're going to continue trusting TAP, as well as others are programs that we're going to continue to focus on and measure through our KPIs. We also have some new focus areas, even here in the last year of the plan. Demand management with the Flume project that I'll talk a little bit about in my comments, which we just kicked off. Our GIS system and an analysis of that system and needed upgrades, and then AI and policies related to that were all included in the KPIs for 2025. As presented at the F&A meeting, we're here today just asking the board to receive and file those KPIs for this year.
So I need a motion to receive and file the 2025 strategic plan initiatives and key performance indicators.
Second.
I'll just say, I understand that receive and file is the terminology, but want to point out that I appreciate the fact that we don't just receive and file, that the KPIs are brought into our board meetings on a regular basis so that we are all kept kind of up to date on the progress being made, that they're an active tool for the utility and not just a binder on the shelf. So thank you for that. Any other questions or comments? Okay, all in favor for the motion on the table, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item 3C is to receive and file the climate action and adaptation plan.
Yes. In February of this year, Andrea, we engaged Black and Beach to develop a climate action and adaptation plan for the utility. Black and Beach used a workshop process where they got teams of employees together to talk about vulnerabilities, strategies, prioritize those things. Specific goals that we had for that process included minimizing system disruption during any kind of extreme weather event, system efficiency and energy savings, and then long-term system resilience and adaptability. It's hard to say for me. So the plan that we did review at the planning committee meeting recently, where I believe we had 5 board members in attendance, which is great to see. The plan included operational strategies and suggested capital investments to help us meet those goals that I just described. I would also note that through the process, some of the proposed adaptation projects were actually integrated into Polk County's hazard mitigation plan, which the board approved fairly recently, so that makes us eligible to request hazard assistance mitigation grants from FEMA and the Department of Homeland Security. Those are the kind of benefits we get from this plan, is prioritizing those projects, getting them listed and helping find some funding potentially to help complete those projects. So with that, I would just say we're here today to ask the board to receive and file the climate action and adaptation plan that was presented to the planning committee meeting this month.
Have a motion to receive and file the climate action and adaptation plan.
So,
Second.
I'd like to say, kind of related to this, but some things we've done, whether it's been reviewing recently the capital improvement plan or some of the other things that have been instituted at Waterworks. I've been on this board for a long time. And when I first joined this board, one of the things that concerned me was a lack of some of that planning. I remember we were behind the 8 ball when it came to capital improvement in those days. With Bill Stowe and then with your leadership, Ted, those things have been rectified and we really have some solid plans. And this is another example of looking out to the future and doing some planning. And I just want to take a moment to, that's taken a real team effort here at Waterworks to make that happen. People to make a commitment to making those plans and sticking to them. But as a result, I think not only from a financial standpoint, but from an operational standpoint, Waterworks is in a lot better place than it was those many years ago when I joined the board. And I can't take any credit of it. All that credit goes to the staff.
Thank you.
My previous comment for the last receive and file stands, and I assume that we will be seeing the work plan within this show up, and as we touch base on it moving forward over the years. That's
the
correct?
plan. We hope for
Okay.
it to be a living document and to help us prioritize some of these projects.
Any other comments or questions? Great. I think most of the board, if not all the board, was on the call for this discussion. So with the motion and the second on the table, I'll go ask all in favor to say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, moving on to item 3D is to request authorization for the CEO and general manager to execute a professional services agreement with Snyder and Associates for the Dyko site water transmission main replacement design and construction services.
Andrea, we have 2 parallel 30-inch water transmission mains that run right through the middle of the Dyko site, which is across the river from us here on the east side of Fluor Drive. The city now owns that site, and they're in the process of redeveloping that area, including some roadway improvements and and other things. Those mains, both, have a history of joint leaks where, because of the way the joints were made and because of the age of the pipe, we occasionally get a joint leak and we end up with our crews over there digging into that contaminated site and making repairs. And it's challenging because we can't take any of the materials off site. The water that has to be pumped out of the hole has to be treated as contaminated. It's a big issue. And not only that, but the city's gonna redevelop it and they don't want to see joint leaks into their new development, whatever that may be. We're proposing to install a single 48-inch transmission main through there. And we're proposing to get some design assistance from Snyder and Associates. We've focusing on Snyder and Associates for a couple of reasons. One, they've been doing some feeder main work for us here recently. They've been doing a good job. They have responded to some RFQs that we have done and were selected based on their knowledge, skills, and experience on exactly this kind of project. We also have a master service agreement with them for consultants, which the board is very familiar with, where we have the terms and conditions of agreements already in place. Now, the anticipated construction cost before design is about $6 million. Normally, the master service agreements are used for projects with a construction cost estimated up to $5 million. Just want to make that clear that we recognize that. We recognize we're early in the process based on the fact that we've very recently vetted Snyder and Associates through an RFQ process. We do have a master service agreement with them. We are recommending that we use Snyder Associates for this project with a fee estimated at $297,000. We have taken this to the CIWW Technical Committee and shared that perspective with them, and they're in support of that approach. And so we're asking for authorization to execute a professional services agreement with Snyder.
So we need a motion to authorize the CEO and general manager to execute a professional service agreement with Snyder and Associates, Inc. in the amount of $297,600 for design, permitting, and construction services for the Dyko site water transmission main replacement project.
So moved.
Second.
Ted, maybe you said this and I missed it. That anticipated $6 million cost, how much more expensive is that because it is a contaminated site?
Lindsay, you have a sense of that?
I do not, honestly, that predates me, the estimated cost, but I don't know.
I mean, because
how
it is gonna be
much.
more
Yeah,
expensive, right?
it'll be more expensive just because of they keep the materials on site, you know what I mean?
Right.
And that sort of thing, but I do not know the answer to that.
And I mean, the site is
Yeah.
open, so I mean, that makes it a little bit
Yeah.
easier. It's not like they're working around buildings and other things.
Right,
So
right.
that does
Yeah,
make it easier.
undeveloped,
I
yeah.
was just curious.
Yeah, that's a good question, but I don't know. Sorry.
So they don't, there's no, I don't know, maybe it would be more expensive to haul away any
Yeah, it'd be hazardous material.
hazardous material, but they'll just keep it on site instead.
Yep, I believe so, Kyle, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Kyle knows more about
As long as
that
you
site
don't
than me.
Take it off site, you can backfill it back into the hole. You have
Okay.
to have certification, you do the excavation on the site, or have somebody that is certified on site when you're digging there.
Mhm.
Much like the groundwater, you gotta be careful when you're pumping that out. Because typically, if you prepare it there, put everything back into the hole. And seal it back in.
Mhm. Any other?
This might be a dumb question. So there's two mains that we're replacing with one
That's right.
for the stretch of the red line there, and then
That's right.
it gets to the right, and then does it go back to two? What's to the east of that, or what happened?
Well, when you get to the street there, which is Southwest 16th Street, one of the two continues east and one of them goes north.
Gotcha.
And so we'll tie the 48-inch into both of those.
Okay.
It should have a carrying capacity comparable to the 230s. But we're just replaced. There's no reason to have two. One of them was just installed a decade before the other. And we're gonna replace it with one that will have the same capacity.
Gotcha.
Ted, is there a reason not to do an RFQ for this one? Is there a dollar threshold that you're working around?
Well, it's We have a process that tells us when we should consider going out for RFQs, and the dollar threshold is $5 million. This is $6 million. But the thing here is that we just went out for an RFQ for the very same kind of work, and went through the whole process, and vetted the consultants and selected Snyder. And so we're anticipating to have the same result. And so we're just saving the time and effort and cost of the RFQ process. That's our proposal, but we want to make sure that the board understands. We think we'll come up with the same result. This is a little bigger project than we would normally use the master service agreement process on, but we're recommending that we do it on this project because of the recent RFQ that we did and the result there, and because we're pretty close in terms of.
I think that's important. And maybe this is what you're asking, maybe it's not, but to understand the master services agreement, and somebody else could describe that better than I could, as far as how we've set that up and made that decision and how that process works for us as a utility.
Yeah, I'll start and then Lindsay can fix what I say, but before Lindsay got here, honestly, we went out basically to RFQ on every single project, and there was a time commitment there and a cost associated with putting those out and reviewing them. And so what we've done more recently is we just asked in advance, say, anybody who wants to do water main work or feeder main work or a dozen kinds of different work, give us a proposal and we'll vet people, consultants through the process, and then we'll identify 2 or 3 or 4 in each category. And then when we have a project, we can just select one of them without having to go through a vetting process, and it saves time and cost. And you know, Snyder is one of the consultants on the list for transmission main projects. We just went through an actual RFQ process and they were selected. And it's important to note that for engineering and architectural services, I'm sure you're aware, but we can't select based on cost alone, state law. That's not allowed. So we have to consider firm experience, other criteria. We just went through that process and selected Snyder. What have I left out, Lindsay?
Not too much. Yeah, when we did the RFQ, we did like 13 different disciplines. So we have like 26 different master agreements that are 5-year agreements. We've established a threshold of 2 million on water treatment projects and 5 million on the distribution projects.
What was the criteria around the threshold selections, the dollar amounts?
Just the amount of that things cost, and more of the facility projects are kind of more, what's the word? Unique, you know, where the water main, we were trying to get a good amount of water main done in one project, so, yeah.
But I think, help me here if I mess this up, but even though we have those master agreements, we still ask for cost proposals from those folks whenever we have a
Yes.
specific project. So it's not a
Yes.
green
Yep.
light across the board. It's just, you know, understanding within this group that we know that we have an agreement with what the cost for a particular project would be.
So yeah, then we would go talk about a certain project, develop a scope and a fee, which has been done for this Geico site with Snyder. Yep. So each project is still, you know, negotiated as far as scope and fee.
And when did we put these master,
There were 2023 to 2028 is the,
so they're all pretty new to
Yeah.
us too in this process.
I would just point out, the board has a fair amount of discretion on how it wants to do these procurements, you know, as long as it's not a public improvement. You know, if you're talking about engineering services or other types of procurement, you know, you have the ability to set policies. And you've done that with the most recently adopted policy for RFQs for professional consultants, and then also these master service agreements. So, but it is something the board should ask questions about, make decisions if they want to change the process.
I want to echo that, especially David, as you're taking notes down there. What John just said, you know, we've tried to think about, you know, the most efficient way to let these contracts for our ratepayers, you know, that's fair to the ratepayers, but all, you know, maybe by bundling these things and going the process that Lindsay has developed. You know, do those make sense? Are we getting the lowest bid? Are we getting the highest quality and that sort of thing? And as John points out, I think it's something that the board should continually look at. And you have a certain expertise just because your day-to-day job of doing contracts. And you should feel free to look at that and, you know, as a board member, suggest changes in this process. As I said, we kind of, with Lindsay's help, really developed some new rules of doing this. But maybe they're the best way, maybe they're not. So, you know, feel free to look at that. And when you see something, especially talk to Lindsay, I think, you know, everybody's here is all ears to figure out that we're doing it the right way.
You know, the board actually challenged us after the pandemic,
That's
and we're
right.
having all of the supply chain issues, and we're having trouble getting contracts. We're having projects where we have one bidder. And the board challenged us to be more creative, and that resulted in this, the master service agreements. It also resulted in some multi-year contracts. We're actually bidding the same project for multiple years in a row. I think 3 is kind of the limit on basin rechaining. Some of the collector well rehabilitation projects. We're bidding multi-year projects. We're doing this kind of master service agreement consultant selection, and just in an attempt to streamline and be more efficient. But this is a little different than what policy says, and I get that, and I want you to be comfortable with that, but there's a reason that we are doing it this way on this one. If we hadn't have recently done an RFQ for transmission main and vetted a contract consultant and selected one, we would have done an RFQ on this project. But because we just did it, we think we can benefit the ratepayers by saving that time and energy and going with this quote. And that's what we're doing.
And again, David, I mean, that history is important, that kind of during the pandemic, especially when labor was so short, and we didn't feel like we were getting enough companies bidding on that, which made sense, right? I mean, they weren't gonna bid on one project. We wondered if we had a multi-year project, you know, multi-year contract, would contractors be more willing to bid? Because they could count on the work and it's good for us, maybe we can count on the amounts. That made sense at the time. Again, maybe times will change and that won't make sense. And, you know, use your expertise and continually look at that.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, there is a motion and a second for this authorization. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item 3E is to request authorization for CEO and general manager to execute amendment number 2 to the professional services agreement with Snyder and Associates for the Saylorville Water Treatment Plant transmission improvements, design and construction services.
Andrea, we were just talking about this a minute ago. You know, we did request proposals for completing the design of this particular project. Snyder was selected at the November board meeting. We were authorized to enter into an agreement with Snyder for about $1 million for design and construction services. We executed one amendment to that agreement for additional services that were outside their original scope. And now we're here to talk about a second amendment for additional work. And the items of additional work are specifically identified there. Some alternatives that had to be evaluated from a design perspective on Hickman Road. Additional construction phase services was a small amount. And then subsurface utility verification, or finding existing utilities so we can work around them with this big pipe in excess of what was originally allocated. So that's what we're talking about here today, an amendment to this professional services agreement. But I also wanted to mention, you know, this is an expansion project for Central Iowa Waterworks. We're expanding the capacity of the system. And going forward, expansion projects will probably are intended to be managed by Central Iowa Waterworks. So Central Iowa will bid them and manage them. And these kinds of projects won't necessarily come to our board other than maybe as information items. But because this project was bid prior to operational commencement, it's our responsibility as Moines Waterworks to complete this work. And so that's why it's coming to this board. Has been reviewed with the technical committee of Central Iowa Waterworks, so they know what's going on here. They're fully aware. But it will not require approval by the Central Iowa Water Works Board. So just, there's this kind of relationship that's developing and it's overlapping a little bit here on this project and a couple of others, but future expansion related projects will be handled by Central Iowa Water. So I just want to make that clear, and we'll continue to talk about that as we have these kinds of projects come up, but I've kind of outlined there what the additional services were that we're talking about in this amendment. I've talked about the process a little bit, and we're looking for authorization to execute amendment number 2.
Okay, so I need a motion to authorize the CEO and general manager to execute amendment number 2 to the professional services agreement with Snyder and Associates, Inc. in the amount of $83,248.
83 million.
That's
Oh, I'm sorry, 1,000. Sorry. Sorry, I'm just checking in.
That's right. 83, that would be a
That'd be
big
a big
amount.
number.
$83,248.70 for the SWTP transmission improvements project.
So moved.
Second. And everybody's awake now.
Yeah.
Especially Amy.
Yes. That would be a big change.
Yeah, that would be on a $1 million PSA, it would be really big.
Any other questions or, wait, what just happened there? Did we-
You're good, yeah.
You're good.
Motion
We have a
second.
motion and a second. Any questions or comments? Okay, let's just go ahead. Oh, were you gonna say something?
No, it's not.
I've said it.
Let's let's go. Let's vote. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? You know, I got caught off guard because of my phone, my watch keeps dinging of people talking about Pride Festival too.
Oh,
And the millions of dollars that, go out the door with that, so.
I hope you're not buying tickets.
Agenda or number 3F is 2024 FWTP distribution building improvements remodel phase 1.
Public hearing.
This is a public
This
hearing.
is a public hearing, so I will go ahead and,
I apologize, did we get a vote on the, Caitlin and I are looking at it, they did approve it,
Yes.
okay.
Yep.
Okay.
gonna wake you guys up enough.
Yeah.
Um,
Off on that one.
it's all right. I'm opening up a public hearing for comments from the public regarding the form of contract, plans and specifications and estimated cost.
We have not received any comments prior to the board meeting.
Okay, do we have anybody here or online that would like to provide any comments regarding the building improvements? Not hearing any. I need a motion for adoption of the form of contract, plans and specifications and estimated cost.
Second.
Okay, we'll go ahead and vote on the motion on the table. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And then moving into the analysis of the bids received, Ted.
Andrea, the board authorized us to solicit for bids at the October board meeting. This project distribution building improvements, phase 1 involves, first of all, some demolition, removing an existing ramp that has reached the end of its useful life. We're actually not going to park cars up on the second level of that building anymore anyway, and so we're going to take advantage of that space and use it for other beneficial purposes, including officing, meeting rooms, training rooms, things like that. This project was presented to the planning committee in November. And then it went out for bid. We received 4 bids. As you can see there in the chart, all 4 of the bids were somewhat below the engineer's estimate, but very close, good bids. The low bid was received from Edge Commercial, who has completed a number of projects successfully for Des Moines Waterworks in the past. And staff would recommend that the board award project to Edge Commercial.
So I need a motion to award the 2024 FWTP Distribution Building Improvements Remodeled Phase 1 project to Edge Commercial in the amount of $1,981,000 and authorize the chairperson and CEO and general manager to execute the contract.
So,
What, looking at the bids there,
Mhm.
the unit price and the alternate one,
Right.
how does that work with the negative number there in
Yeah, we analyze all of those collectively, and we're recommending that we award the alternate,
Just the base. bid.
just the base bid. So we analyze all of that together and determine which one we wanted to do based on the overall costs. So combining those and choosing which alternate. The alternate was based on paving material, whether we did concrete or asphalt, basically.
okay,
And so that alternate was to replace concrete with asphalt. So we just wanted to see if one of the other of those was gonna be significantly cheaper enough to make a difference in helping us determine, but we've chosen to stay with concrete.
so with Accurate Commercial, if we went the other way, it would lessen their base bid by that 48, okay, gotcha, all right.
Is that typical that we would see asphalt be higher than concrete?
It kind of depends. Some of the contractors have a relationship with an asphalt provider or concrete provider, or some of them put money in and out of different places to try to get the job. It's never exactly clear of how they construct those bids, but we look at what they bid and see what the bottom, the lowest cost would be, and consider our preference. I think concrete would typically be our preference. But in this case, a couple of the contractors were gonna bid asphalt higher. One was gonna bid it lower, and I don't know that I can explain exactly.
We have a motion on the table, all in favor of the award as recommended, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item 3G is to request permission to solicit bids for 2025 FWTP Lab HVAC and roof upgrades project and establish the date of the public hearing as the date of the April 2025 board meeting.
Andrea, this is pretty straightforward project. We still have the original roof and HVAC system, as I understand it, on the lab. It was built 26 years ago. They both have reached their useful life. There have been some leaks, in fact, and a lot of work over there. We want to upgrade the ventilation equipment there. And even beyond just what you think of as normal HVAC. We want to work on some exhaust hoods and other types of ventilation. So we put together a project to do all of that, and at the same time replace the roof membrane, get a new roof on the building. Plans and specifications are nearly complete. We've got an engineer's estimate there. 718,000, about 719,000. We have reviewed this with the CIWW Technical Committee. This is a facility that transferred to Central Iowa Waterworks. But this is what we consider a joint capital project. It was in the budget that we gave to Central Iowa. We, as the producer, are responsible for completing joint capital projects on the facilities that we had previously owned, the facilities that we're now operating and maintaining for Central Iowa Waterworks. We're responsible for moving those joint capital projects through the process through our normal existing processes. So we're here today requesting authorization to solicit bids for the project.
Can I have a motion to authorize staff to solicit bids for the 2025 FWTP Lab HVAC and roof upgrades project and establish the date of the public hearing as the date of the April 2025 board meeting and direct staff to publish notice as provided by law?
Second.
quick question. So the 2025 facilities management budget, that's CIWW's budget or our budget?
Well, it's in our budget that we gave to CIWW to include in their budget. So, it will be a reimbursement.
We get reimbursed and then we pay for our share of this project through our water use to CIWW
Okay, so it's 2025 Des Moines Waterworks facility management budget.
and CIWW.
And CIW.
We budget for all of those joint capital projects that are gonna happen on our facilities in our budget, which gets approved by our board. Because we're gonna we're gonna prosecute all those projects through our process, just like this. And then we give it to CIWW. And they incorporate that into their budget that helps them establish their rates, which they charge to us and everyone else. Collect the money that they need to actually pay for those projects.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Does this mean that an architect's already on board? Preparation of.
Yes,
plans?
IMEG and SVPA are worked on the plans.
If there are no other, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item 3H is the request authorization to solicit bids for 2024 Des Moines Water Main Replacement Contract 1. And establish the date of the public hearing as the date of the March 2025 board meeting.
Andrea, this is a typical water main replacement contract, like we did several of every year. You can see in the memo, we're gonna do work on several streets there. The map is on the following page. We try to kind of locate those in proximity to each other when we put these contracts together. The engineer's estimate for the project is $2.2 million, and we're here today to request authorization to solicit bids for the project.
Can someone make a motion to authorize staff to solicit bids for the 2024 Des Moines Water Main Replacement Contract 1, establish the day of the public hearing as the date of the March 2025 board meeting, and direct staff to publish notice as provided by law.
So
Second.
Any questions or comments? All in favor, say aye.
All right.
Item 3I is the request authorization for CEO and general manager to execute change order number 4 to Des Moines Waterworks, Saylorville Water Treatment Plant, West Feeder Main Phase 3 project.
Andrea, this is a project that we awarded to SJ Lewis back in February of 2024, so just about 1 year ago. They've been working on the project now for several months, making good progress. We, as we often do, have run into a few unexpected underground situations that have resulted in some change orders. They're kind of running total of the change orders is there in kind of the lower table on the board member or on the memo. And then the upper table is actually the specific items that are included in this change order number 4, which is just over $100,000. So the total revised contract sum to date is shown there. A couple $100,000 more than we started with, about a 2% change, which is not unexpected on an underground project with infrastructure this size. So we're here today asking that the board authorize execution of change order number 4 to the project.
Need a motion to authorize the CEO and general manager to execute change order number 4 to the south. To the SWTP West Feeder Main project, or West Feeder Main Phase 3 project in the amount of $100,775.90.
So moved.
Second.
This is a good opportunity to point out though, Amy, I mean, this is another, we don't own this, this is a CIWW, so just explain the process. We're about to approve this action and what happens at CIWW now.
This is the, so this is similar to what Ted talked about before where we started this expansion project.
Yep.
So we took this to the technical committee and voted on it.
Right.
They actually, everybody voted in favor of this change order.
Right.
And so then we just bring it for approval. So-
And I
Yeah.
just said that because I'm just pointing out,
Yep.
there's a
Yes.
kind of a two-phase process here.
But
Yeah.
like in the future, the CIWW expansions will be done by CIWW and
Yep.
go to their board.
Yep.
Because we started this at the same.
And the only thing I would add is this is, again, debt funded, and so we incur the expense initially. Tammy requests the drawdown. Once she gets the reimbursement from the Iowa Finance Authority, then we get reimbursed. So that's the full cycle.
We have a motion and second on the table. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item 3J is to request authorization for CEO and general manager to execute change orders for Des Moines Waterworks ground maintenance facility.
Andrea, this is change order number 2 for the grounds maintenance facility, which is essentially done. But we're having ironically, some water quality problems in the building that are preventing us from moving into the building. You may recall that change order number 1 was brought to the board back in May of 2024. We ran into a lot of unsuitable soil material on that site, and we had to do a lot of trucking off soil material and bringing it back. And so that was a fairly significant change order, $147,000 of additional costs to stabilize the site so that we could build a nice stable building there. Now we're nearing the end of the site, and so we're kind of bringing you the laundry list of other things that have changed along the way. There's kind of a list of them there. We can certainly talk about any that you might have questions about. There are some additions and some reductions, but the net total there is about $131,000 for change order number 2. And we're here today to ask the board's authorization to execute change order number 2 on the ground shop project.
I need a motion to authorize the CEO and general manager to execute change orders for the Des Moines Waterworks grounds maintenance facility in an additional amount of $131,109.40.
Second,
Any questions or comments?
just as I get up to speed, does Waterworks carry a owner contingency to cover these sort of change orders, or how do you plan for change orders? That's my organization.
Typically, you would assume about a 10% contingency, right, on construction. I would assume, you know what I mean, but as far as, that's kind of what I would recommend, so. When we do our budgets.
Yeah, and I don't know that you'll see a line item for contingency in the budget.
Yeah.
We'll budget the project. We try to include the contingency in the overall budget, which would be, design services, our own labor, and material expense, the construction costs. And then, if need be, if we end up a little over or under, which we always do, we never hit the budget exactly, but we'll shift funds a little bit here and there to make sure that we cover the costs. If we're over, we'll cover it from savings on other projects. Usually if we're over too far, we may have to, defer something later in the year to cover the cost. We have a project that bids significantly over at the end of the year, we don't have to defer that project until the following year, but we always manage to a zero-sum budget. But we're less likely to have a specific line item in the budget that says, construction contingency. We just haven't done it that way, but we do manage to a zero-sum budget.
Thank you.
So I guess I didn't quite follow on this one. What you said, water issue, like. I guess
I'm
what,
gonna make Kyle explain it because I don't know that I can.
Ironically, when the water sits in the service line for a couple days, you're seeing discolored water coming into the building. So there's thought that there is something in the service line that's rusting or something that is causing turbidity when we use water at the stack for a couple days. The contractor was televising and looking at the what is corroding, creating this discolored water.
service line insurance.
Fortunately,
Which,
we have a contractor who's still on the hook, though, so they're gonna get it resolved.
So we have a motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
Right.
Any opposed? Item 3K is to request authorization to reimburse the city of Des Moines for water main replacement and relocations for the Southeast Connector from Southeast 30th to US 65 project.
Andrea, the city is moving ahead with finishing the MLK corridor there. Last piece is from Southwest 30th to Highway 65. There's a map on the second page that does a pretty nice job of showing the impacts, places where we're gonna have water infrastructure impact either by the roadway itself or by sewers or storm sewers that are being constructed along there. The memo identifies a couple of the more significant impact areas on Southeast 30th Street, where we're gonna replace a fairly meaningful amount of water main, and then on Southeast 43rd, also related to this construction. We include all of this work in the city's contract. They pay for it initially and then we reimburse them. The estimated cost of all that work is $830,000. And that work is gonna take place over a 4-year period from 2025 to 2028. So in all likelihood, we will reimburse them at the end of that entire stretch of time. So I would point out that there are other implications related to larger diameter mains or extensions of mains that are necessary that are going to be a part of this project also, but we're not going to have to reimburse for those because of our agreement with the city. They impact our larger diameter mains. They include those as project costs, and that's a real benefit to us. So today we're here requesting authorization to reimburse the city for an estimated $830,000 worth of work at the point when the work is complete and we're invoiced by the city.
Can I have a motion to authorize staff to reimburse City of Des Moines for water main work included in the Southeast Connector from Southeast 30th to US 65 project?
So moved.
Second.
So does, I mean, it's 830, 105, the number, despite the fact this is occurring over 3 years?
No, that's the estimated number based on the unit prices that were included in their contract.
Mhm.
The unit prices won't change, but the amount could change. Instead of it being 280 feet of pipe, it could be 295 feet of pipe, and then
Sure.
we'll end up having to pay for that extra 15 feet of pipe. So that's an approximate number, and those always change somewhat.
But the unit price is locked in.
Right, the project has already bid,
Okay.
so those unit prices should be locked.
Right.
Do we have, is there any kind of idea, I mean, I know this is time dependent really of this, what is work that is actually kind of an improvement that's just getting fallen into this versus just work that we have to do because they're.
I don't know that we've separated it out that way. I will tell you that as a rule, it's unusual for the city to do work on a street that we really want to replace the water main in. It's very fortunate happenstance when that happens. But it does save us money. I mean, we couldn't do this much work for $830,000 if we were out there tearing streets out and doing it all by ourselves. So we get some benefit from it, but I don't have any sense of, and I don't know, Lindsay, if you do, Mike, if you have a sense of whether these were projects that would have been on the list in the next 5 years or 10 years. I'm gonna tell you, based on my experience, usually not. Just, tremendous good fortune if it worked out that way, but it doesn't.
And then if you don't know, that's fine. When the city is talking about total project costs on something like this, are they including this kind of figure, or do they net that out because they don't actually have to pay for it?
I think they net it out. They probably include the feeder mains if they have to alter those, but
As far as their cost,
their total cost,
I
yeah.
mean, is that's what they bid, right? That's their bid amount. That's
The bid amount
62
would
million.
include what
Would include
what
everything.
we're gonna
Yeah.
pay them back for. But when they're talking about their total cost for the
Yeah.
project, I'm guessing they're netting
Net,
everybody else's
yeah.
expense out.
Any other questions, comments? All right, we have a motion on the table. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, this leads us to item 3L, which is the CEO selection process discussion. I think before we can start this agenda item, we have to acknowledge that Ted has shared with us, with the board members and staff and the community that he is looking and anticipating retiring on July 18th of this year. And we want to, as a board, make sure that we are doing our due diligence in finding someone to replace him and lead the Des Moines Waterworks team. But also doing that in a manner that will give enough time for that person to be onboarded before Ted leaves. We're in a interesting place and time, given that the nature of Des Moines Waterworks has shifted a little bit from who we were when Ted was selected to lead the utility to now where our producing side of it has for all intent and purposes been regionalized and in the hands of CIWW. So there's a lot to consider during this process. But I believe that the goal at this time, or the process at this time, is to work in-house here with our HR team and have them lead us through the selection process. I'm gonna take a minute and stop talking to see if anybody has any thoughts or comments off the top of their head right now.
Let me start if I can. You know, I've talked about this, Andrea, and I've talked about it with Ted. I mean, from my standpoint, you know, there's a couple of things. Well, first of all, this is, you summed it up appropriately. This search may be a little different than some of the searches we've done in the past and what Waterworks may do in the future. We are in this transition period with Central Iowa Waterworks. And I'll come back to that. To me, what's most important is that we hire a CEO and general manager who understands the challenges that we face and can represent our ratepayers. And as importantly, someone who can create the type of workplace that is safe for our employees and a place where our employees want to work. So those should be the two driving things that a CEO and general manager should have in the back of his or her mind. Now, this search is a little bit different. I would be the first one to say that whenever we handle a search, we should cast a wide net. We should, you know, in the past, we've hired search consultants. We put out a national search, and maybe that's something we can do, but I think what's most important is that we hire a person who understands the complexities of this transition to Central Iowa Waterworks, right? So that not only that, you know, they understand and can quickly come up to speed so that, I mean, just look at today's agenda. Today's agenda had so many items of that complex relationship we have with CIWW. And that person should be able to quickly get up to speed on that piece of it. What's very important to me as a board member, and this board has stated over and over again, as we get that influx of revenue from Central Iowa Waterworks, from forming Central Iowa Waterworks, we're going to have this huge amount of revenue. We have stated time and time again that those monies need to be put into upgrading and renewing our infrastructure, our distribution infrastructure. You know, I would want the CEO and general manager on day one to be able to come in and not only understand that we've made that commitment to ratepayers, but be able to begin to implement that long-range plan, to put those dollars to the right use. We're not looking for somebody to come in and come up with a new idea of how to spend this revenue. We have committed to our ratepayers how we are gonna spend that revenue. So, that being said, I appreciate and approve the approach that you've outlined here, Andrea, that we start with kind of a, let our in-house HR experts put out the search and let's see what comes of that. But as I say, this search is just a little bit different, and as long as we can find a person in this, initial advertisement, if you will, that meets that criteria, I think I'm gonna be satisfied, and I think we can find that person.
I agree. So, in discussing kind of the process with our HR team, the idea, if agreeable to everyone around this table, is that we would put out a job description, and open that up both to internal, applicants as well as those who may come across it on it will be posted on the Des Moines Waterworks website. But then to have them, to not do any national advertising. When Alec and I spoke with our HR team, and they shared kind of the process that we've gone through over the past two, searches for CEOs, what struck me was that we had gone through hiring a outside consultant to lead that search both times. And we had done that nationwide search both times. And both times we ended up hiring locally. And so it seems to me it would be prudent that rather than starting big and then hiring local, that we start to see if we have any, any leadership, any applicants here locally that would meet all the criteria and hit all the priorities and visions that this board has. And then if not, spend the time and money to go to cast that wider net.
How much did we spend on those searches, Doug? Do you remember?
I think it was around $30,000.
Okay, so it's not a huge amount, but I mean, it's amount.
I think it's more than that, but yeah, okay. And we, because we've been through those searches twice, and I believe you were here for both of them, question mark? Just one. Well, you know what? That last one that I went through seemed very in-depth. And so I imagine that with that experience and with the experience April brings from her previous position, we can replicate a lot of the same, in our HR team can replicate a lot of those same vetting processes. I think it's important that the last one that I participated in, brought in, allowed for feedback, whether through panel discussions or survey discussions, getting the feedback from, the management staff, the labor leadership, and even some of our partners. I think all of that is critical to maintain, but to let it happen here in-house.
Could you, and maybe this is a question for Doug or April, but so if we decide we're gonna go with this approach and the team, in-house team is gonna do this, they would basically put out the advertisement, whatever it's called, as soon as possible.
Mhm.
And then how long of a period of time are we gonna accept applications?
Currently planned to have it open through March 21st.
March 21st?
So that is
About 3.5 weeks or so.
3.5 weeks.
Okay, so we, by our next board meeting, have a good idea of what the candidate pool is.
Correct.
Does that seem like an adequate enough time period to have it open? It does to me, but I'm just asking.
Yeah, I mean, I think I guess it's hard to say. Knowing that if Ted was looking to be done in next year, probably we open, but we do have a little bit of a deadline, I think, because Ted wants to go on vacation and do all the fun stuff. So I'm fine with it, I guess personally. I'm out the first 2 weeks of March, so can't do it. I wouldn't shorten it anyways. I think that's too short.
Well, I don't think you want to shorten it. I was just asking if it's long enough. I mean, we could always, if for some reason didn't feel like we had an adequate pool on the 21st, you could then reopen it, or we could do some other thing.
And I think that, you know, we put out a press release already. And, I guess I haven't paid attention to whether or not that's been in any, media.
Yeah, so.
Great, good.
It was in the register today, which makes it feel efficient.
Okay, but I, within that, points to the fact that we will be hiring, so I think that, you know, word is going to get out there, and so the 3.5 would be adequate in my mind, to have that linger.
I mean, I think we could always decide to extend it, like we said, if
Right.
it's, you know, we feel like we're not there. And yeah, you know, Andrew and I have been meeting with on this. I agree with Graham's points around, you know, what we're looking for as far as the next leader, and especially the complexity with CIWW and everything going on. So I think, you know, I think it's good to have the opportunity to open it up to anybody without spending a lot of time and resource on it. You know, I do think even, you know, even in the past when we had spent some money and then hired internally, I think you can also look at that as a confirmation process of like, hey, we did actually do a search and we're just confirming our decision. So I wouldn't say that it's money poorly spent or anything, but I think right now, I don't think we feel the need to do it. You know, we understood the previous search was pretty intensive in terms of all the feedback mechanisms, which I think we'd like to reconstruct some version of that. I think getting input from various groups and stakeholders will be important, obviously, and then ultimately it will be our decision as a board to make that selection. So
Do you plan on, putting this out to like the Waterworks Association, those groups that we're members of, where it would be wider than just.
When it goes live, through our, we posted, it'll actually have, you know, yeah, for anybody to see, and so we'll also do some advertising, not advertising, but just making certain organizations aware too, that we've got this recruitment in place.
Where there's certain people of expertise, the Waterworks Association, and those places, they would be notified.
I think it's, you know, a sort of free advertising in a way when you have something like this, and I've thought about it too. Within one of my early jobs in my career, the job I interviewed for was not the job that I ultimately got with the company, but it got me connected and getting to know their management team. So we don't know who might be out there that's interested in being part of this, you know, institution, whether in CEO or maybe they're better fit somewhere else.
The interview process that we've used in the past, if we have multiple candidates who want to interview, will have to change. The Iowa Court of Appeals recently interpreted the how the open meetings exception works for interviewing prospective candidates. This just happened in January, so I think many public bodies have gotten accustomed to being able to go into closed session to interview prospective candidates because of the concern about their potential being an injury to their professional reputation. That was the ground that a lot of public bodies had used. We now have to make a finding when we go into closed session that as to how the topics being discussed will injure the professional reputation of the individual being reviewed or having their qualifications discussed. And if we don't make that finding, then we have to come back out of closed session into open session. So there are some ways that I think we can accomplish getting some interviews done by the board that don't necessarily require subjecting somebody to, you know, interrogation here in an open meeting, but I'll have to talk to Doug about the process that we use, but it will have to be different than it was before.
I think, you know, between now and March 21st, there's probably a larger conversation that Alec and myself will have with Doug in April and the rest of your team to figure out the process. But at this time, I think our first priority is just to make sure that this board feels comfortable with the path forward in posting it online, not hiring a third-party consultant. You know, looking at that March 21st deadline for resumes and not spending the money as well for any advertising, just kind of putting it in the most obvious places and moving forward from there.
Ted, your CEO, you've been through this process. Does this make sense to you?
It does. I definitely support a somewhat simpler process than what we did last time, and I think especially, if you share with AWWA and a couple of the standards, the people who need to know will know. We're gonna help.
You don't need a vote or anything.
No, I don't need a vote, but I wanna, welcome to the board
Yeah.
in their first board meeting, and so I wanna provide some space if you have any, questions or thoughts or comments.
Well, I have the distinct advantage and disadvantage of being brand new and not having gone through orientation, not having relationships with staff. And I'm thinking about what happens if we go through that open search and the board can't align
Mhm.
on a candidate. What happens next? And I don't think we need to decide that today.
Sure.
But I think it's important that we start planning for, if we do need to open it up, what does that process and timeline look like? Sure. Because I would rather have the right candidate here in September
Mhm.
versus the wrong candidate here in June.
Sure, it's a good point.
I understand that.
Yeah.
And I'll just give you historical perspective, just to embarrass Ted a little bit.
Yeah.
I voted against Ted, at the time. And so we have a pretty open conversation about that. I would thoroughly enjoy working with Ted. I'm a big supporter of his, but I mean, that was just the process, and my vote was really about the process. So we have a history of having open and honest discussion about these things.
Okay, so do we, right, I'm walking out of here feeling like we are aligned on the process. I want to make sure that, Doug, you feel like you got what you need to feel comfortable to let that fly, that job opening position out there, and move forward from there. Okay, if that's the case, my computer has shut down. And the next agenda item is the Northeast Booster Station.
Yeah, I'll take that one.
Okay.
I was just gonna cover that in my comments, but I'll take it right now. The Northeast Booster Station was a project that we had brought to the board some months ago, October-ish, and requested permission to bid. Sometime subsequent to that, we approved an agreement with the city of Bondurant for construction of that booster station and some pipelines and the funding. And then we actually set a public hearing to award that contract. But unfortunately, to date, the city of Bondurant has not signed the agreement, has not approved the agreement. And so I just wanted to make public comment that we're not having a public hearing on award of that booster station project because we haven't even advertised it or bid it yet. And we're in the midst of negotiations with Bondurant about how we're going to move forward to serve them now that they've decided not to join Central Iowa Waterworks. They're building their own treatment plant, and the timelines are a little bit challenging there. The reason it was on the agenda was just simply to make public comment that we're not having a public hearing, and that's
Our next information item would be our board committee reports. The Finance and Audit Committee.
We had briefly discussed, had our strategic goals presented. There's a lot of information in that meeting, so I don't even know how to succinctly summarize it other than as Andrea said earlier, I think we're very appreciative as a board that it's not just receive and file, that we come back and talk about these. Well, is it quarterly that we update?
it is quarterly, yes.
And so I appreciate that. But otherwise, short of going into every little goal in detail, I think
Sure.
just moving along, and as was mentioned earlier, we're getting ready. So this is the last, I guess maybe I'll have Ted give a quick update, or maybe Ken, but this is the last year of the current strategic planning, we would then begin next year as plan one, year one of the new plan, or work on the new plan or something.
Right, historically, we have done strategic planning in 5-year cycles, assuming that, things change enough over 5 years, we want to take another look at it. And in the first year of the cycle, we usually do the plan and establish some priorities. And then we spend 4 years working on those, implementing those priorities. And so that's a 5-year cycle. 2025 is the 5th year. And in some years, we jumped right back in the very next year, which would be 2026, and then went through a planning process again. And developed another 5-year plan, and in other situations, we have waited a year or two. And so that will be a decision that we can make. That the new CEO can make the board. But this is the last year of the current plan.
Our planning committee.
Yes, that's me. So, Black and Beach joined us to go through the climate action adaptation plan that we filed today as an agenda item. And talked through next steps of implementation with that plan and how it fits into our capital improvement plan and alignment with the hazard mitigation plan. And then Kyle provided an update on a busy month for main breaks. This, I guess, would have been in January, 90 main breaks, a total of 300 main breaks budget for the year. There was even a weekend where 12 main breaks occurred, so team's been busy. That was the meeting.
Great, thank you. Our membership committee, CIWW report. I guess I'm gonna link to you, Ted, since Diane's
Since
not
Diane's
here.
gone, there
Yeah.
is a quick synopsis here in the board packet of a couple of things were handled at the last board meeting. They received and filed the future production study from HDR, which projects how much capacity we're going to need in the metro in the coming years. There's been a lot of discussion about that report because it projects a lot of demand, which drives a lot of cost. But it was good discussion, and they did receive and file the report. Also, I think the board is aware that David Jones, who was a representative of the city of Ankeny on the CIWW board, has moved from the city of Ankeny as their city manager to the city of Urbandale as their city manager. And he was the vice chair of the Central Iowa Waterworks Board. He will be replaced as vice chair by Mayor John Edwards of the city of Clive. Will be the new vice chair. And then also a resolution to engage Nymaster Good as general counsel for Central Iowa Waterworks, which I think is a good outcome and appropriate for them moving forward. Those were the highlights of the meeting.
So we received a copy of CIWW minutes. I assume, David, you're on that list to receive those now. Is there any other questions or comments from our board members regarding CIWW?
I would just note that we've been in touch with Neil at Nymaster as general counsel to CIWW. I think so far we're off to a good start in terms of legal counsel working together, which will be important.
Andrew, I don't think I'm on those.
Okay, can we, yeah, sure, David gets those minutes. The next is Des Moines Waterworks Park Foundation. The minutes from their last meeting in January are included. I think some of the more important things to note is kind of working through and putting together their budget for this year, and clarifying a lot of contracts and setting up some new contract templates to ensure that their revenue generators for 2025 are working in the most efficient and effective way possible. And Pat, I will turn to you to see if you have anything.
Well, I mean, we talked about the fall pass that we're looking at planning this fall and a couple other events.
If you may remember, me mentioning that they are no longer doing the egg extravaganza for Earth Day. And they're backfilling that, with other programming to ensure that people get to the park for, during that time and some education, but I think really, moving, the Fall Fest to be a signature project that gets people into the park and gives them an opportunity to, be educated in all things waterworks and what the park has to offer. I don't know if there's anything else you wanna make sure that we touch on Amy as an attendee to that meeting as well.
Yeah, I'm very pleased. I see the board, the Park Foundation Board really focusing on their processes and looking ahead to ensure financial sustainability. They're just really, as Andrea said, looking at contracts, looking at way to diversify revenue. So it's not all just compressed to, a 4-month schedule. So I think Chris Birch has brought a good perspective.
With that, I'll turn it to you, Ted, for the CEO and general manager comments.
A couple things, Andrea. We have launched our residential water use program, our demand management program through Flume last week. We did kind of a soft launch with emails going out to staff and board to see how much interest we had from folks in participating in that program. We've had about a dozen folks sign up thus far, obviously hoping for more, but this week we will start sending emails out to customers at large in the Des Moines and total service community. So
Remind me how many people you wanted to give that.
600 is the total that we budgeted for.
Do the first 12 people win a prize?
Yeah,
You one of those?
I am.
yeah. Yeah,
I bet you did, cause I had to wait.
Graham was pretty fast.
Somebody
Say
to give
that.
me a credit card number.
We've had some enthusiastic early adopters, let's just say that. And we're looking for more. I also, wanted to share, a couple more details. David already shared from the committee meeting, that we had a busy January with breaks, but I checked with Jenny today and we're at 123 so far, which is a very, very busy January and February. We had a 25 break week, 7 days of really cold temperatures. The super cold temperatures always drive breaks, and it's kind of a double whammy because there's a break and it's really cold and people have to be out overnight, all night. Hats off to the folks who end up doing that.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but I do want to interrupt you because I think that needs a spotlight. It is insanely cold out and we have our employees out there working to ensure that people have water in those insanely cold nights. And I appreciate the work that you all do to make that possible, because that's an incredible task to be repairing water mains when I can't imagine. So thank you.
It's hard work and it needs to be recognized. So I didn't want to just touch on that again. And then lastly, from an update perspective, I wanted to let the board know a couple of legislative updates. We have introduced, or we've worked with legislators to introduce legislation that would require disclosure of a lead service line at time of sale. If a property owner knows that they have a lead service line, that legislation on the Senate side has made it through subcommittee and committee. So it's out of committee on the Senate side. The House side, there hasn't been a subcommittee meeting yet, but we understand that there will be. The only opposition has come from the Realtors Association, but very recently on Friday, they changed their registration from opposed to undecided, and they reached out to us and said, hey, maybe we work with you on a couple of tweaks to that language, and we won't oppose what you're trying to do here. So that's a really positive outcome there. I'm hopeful that we will get a disclosure requirement through the legislature this year. We're also very carefully watching legislation that would change the voting requirements in Iowa Code Chapter 388, which is the chapter of the code that governs independent municipal utilities, including Des Moines Water Works. There's consideration being given to eliminating the referendum requirement, so that if there was interest in eliminating a board managed utility, it would not require a public referendum. Obviously, we're opposed to that and working pretty hard on that right now. So,
Where is that one in the process, do you know?
it has come out of subcommittee on the Senate side, and it's going to committee with likely it will move out of the committee. Some chance that we'll move out. Nothing's happened on the House side.
That's a troublesome bit.
Yeah, but it's in the committee process, and a lot of opposition there, and we're hoping to shore up that opposition, keep that one from happening. So those are my updates. I would point out to the board a couple of things. We've got our community outreach update in the packet. Some things ongoing, specifically related to the legislative session. Our safety update, where there's some information there about sort of the revisioning of our central safety committee, and some things we're working on there with the staff on the central safety committee to try to elevate its exposure in terms of employees being familiar with central safety and seeing good work that they do. And I think that's it.
I appreciate hearing the update on the Central Safety Committee. I know that's something that Graham and I have been following, and I think there's a great opportunity there to, as this memo says, improving the trust. So thank you for making sure that that gets updated, or the board gets updated on that progress. Okay, well, with that, that kind of takes us through our end. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
I closed my. That was.
That was just weird to ask for a vote.